then officially now welcoming you on behalf of the summit and our online audience. Thank you so much for being here again with us today. And we want to start with some questions by the audience. So the first question is for Simon. What kinds of opportunities do you see in the NFT space for supporting artists and/or institutions that were impossible before?
Impossible before NFTs. I don't know. I think one of the big opportunities for NFTs is a way of containing things that were otherwise before quite difficult to put in a fundable category. So ephemeral artworks, digital artworks, these things have always had a hard time finding a way to keep financial value and to kind of like hold the support that comes with investment. And I think that like poems, words, images, other kinds of software packages, artworks which have been made for a long time in rather ephemeral packages. Now, I think both for artists and for institutions have a kind of different way of being both archived, cared for, and supported through that format. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest ones.
Super. Great, thank you. The second question is for Daniel. If the art world is an early alarm system, like you've said so many times, what are digital art and NFTs telling us, you think?
Yeah, that is a quote from John Cage, one of his well-known essays from the late 60s, where he says art can be an early alarm system. It's a figure of thought that I have, found in many writers. Even in that, I remember when we were in Verbier physically, some of us, a few years ago. I remember there was another quote that is kind of similar that we discussed, and it's from the most famous of Walter Benjamin essays on the on art in the age of reproducibility, where he says that sometimes art can be prophetic. He doesn't use that word, but it can anticipate things that haven't really been possible yet because the technology or the medium didn't exist yet. And there are many examples of that, when like Emily Bronte's novels being written as like film scripts, although there was no film yet, or let's say Borges' short stories having the structure of hypertext, although there were no computers yet. And that's a kind of more maybe less romantic idea of being prophetic. Well, the digital sphere, does it anticipate? Well, what I'm doing, my day job these days, is that we're trying to produce works in new mediums, and it's a very artist-centric endeavor, this Acute Art Studio that I'm part of. So in a way, we try to explore what happens if important, significant artists get access to tools that they maybe didn't have. And the most extreme thing we've done right now is that we supported the Serpentine Gallery in reproducing their entire institution in the biggest game in the world, inside Fortnite. And I mean, I don't think that this is something that will take away from traditional exhibitions or museums or anything. But of course, it is a kind of possibility to be nowhere and everywhere at the same time. In a way, the show is the most attended show in the history of exhibition making. It was in the hub of Fortnite for a week, meaning 10 to 15 million people a day. And, and the normal art world that I have inhabited for 25 years or so is very much, used to shipping art and traveling and all of that. This, of course, was or is, it's still up and running, a very different kind of exhibition model. People playing a game where you normally shoot each other is maybe not the ideal kind of replacement of the Biennale, but it does show that there will be new possibilities. I mean, I've been invited 1 trillion times to conferences now about the metaverse and what it might be or not be and what it will be. I think this is the first time I'm involved with something which is not ironically or critically about the metaverse. It is the metaverse. I mean, at least it's the kind of metaverse that now exists, that 400 million kids are actually playing that game. So I guess, we can see these experiments as a glimpse of future exhibition formats and maybe a new institutional structure. Who knows?
Great. Thank you for that answer, Daniel. The next question is for Tobias. You have said that inherent in the concept of systems is the cycle of extraction, use, and organization. Is it possible to have a productive system without extraction?
I have to reject all responsibility because it was just an observation that I offered to Simon about his work. And so maybe one way of trying to respond to that is yeah, I'll respond in two different ways. So the first one is to say, let's not ontologize the idea that the world is organized in systems as if it is always what the world is. It's a mode of description to bring something into view. And what it brings into view is that any form of assuming that a system, you know, it reminds me of Foucault's critique of power, so to speak, articulating easy critique, which usually implies a norm, assumes that this norm is good, whereas the norm is usually part of a system on which it is dependent. And so there is no easy inside or outside or something like that. So the system that is evoked by people who articulate critique may very well be in itself deeply entangled with the production and extraction. And so maybe a second way to put this is to, or a second way of answering this is to say, can we create moments of suspense that I would consider freedom, you know, moments of escape, moments that are not subsumable under current modes of thinking or systems that allow for the possibility of an otherwise. And so, you know, mischievously, I could point to exhibits that Daniel organized as examples of this, and I can point to Simon's work as suspense because they create this disarming balance in the moment.
Like to go there and be a final.
And so maybe a last attempt would be to say, can one try to organize relations? And relations can be ownership, thinking about Web3 or thinking about digital assets, you know, is like, for me, the most fascinating part about NFTs is that they are maybe a new configuration of relations in terms of ownership, in forms of an ownership that's very different from, or could be very different of ownerships, of what ownership was before. Could one organize such modes of relations, such relational configurations in terms of suspense, in terms of openness or undecidability? And I think so, I hope so, I wish so.
Thank you. That's a great answer to a complicated question. The next one is for both of you. So for both Simon and Tobias, how does the engagement for sustainability in the arts world and the tech industry compare?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, so how does the engagement for sustainability in the art world and in the digital or tech industry compare?
I would have to say I don't know. I don't have an overview of either. I mean, what I can say is that I know I'm a little bit closer to the art world personally than the tech world. I know some people who work in tech, but not so many. What I do know is there's some really interesting initiatives in art that are trying to quantify and work to be aware of, for example, emissions and exhibitions, both digital emissions and others. I'm thinking of the work right now of an initiative called Art into Acres, run by Hayley Mellon, who's a really interesting artist, but also a conservationist who is working to bring artists and museums, institutions, and also those in the digital sphere, those working in crypto and NFTs, into dialogue with conservation projects all around the world, and to direct some funds to supporting very deep conservation projects. And she can speak about this better than I can, but I know that it's a relatively recent initiative and it's got a lot of support. I think there's also a lot of desire to do that from within the art world. So that's maybe a space which I know, which is moving in a really positive direction. Tobias?
Great, thank you. Tobias?
I wish to derail the question a little bit. So the reason for this is that I'm just not very fond of the term sustainability. It took me some time to be able to articulate that, but let's say there is a concept of capitalism or the market that is, based on extraction, as you put it before, on extraction of raw materials, and there is that's a form that's understood as and is a negative form of exploitation. And so sustainability is kind of an effort to say, okay, how could we continue to do this, but make sure that the raw materials grow back so that we can steadily be in this loop of extraction. And I'm really interested in possibilities of finding a way out of that system without necessarily saying markets are bad, art market, tech market. I try to be fairly agnostic there to some degree. So I'm really interested in, are there modes of production? Are there possibilities of doing things that escape that? And there I'm very interested in stuff like, synthetic biology as an opportunity. So say a pharma company cuts some flowers in Patagonia, then ships them to India, where the heads of the flowers get cut off. And then these heads go to New Zealand or to Australia, where they're extracted. Then it goes to Switzerland, where they're sort of cooked. Then it goes to America. So this global supply chain. And then you could imagine yeast cells that have a form of plant biosynthesis, where you can do everything in a fermenter behind your house, so to speak. Is that an alternative? Yeah, this is a question that I find very attractive and very interesting. And I think artworks, take Annika Yee's engagement with microbes, just as an example, are actually trying to explore that space right now, probably more explicitly and effectively than companies. And I was going to say that's sad, but let's say that's an opportunity for companies to do better.
Great, thank you. We have a lot more questions, such as questions on the metaverse and on gaming. Other questions popped up, but we only have 3 minutes left. So maybe we can end with the question that we would like to ask all three of you. What is the main point that you would like for people to take away from your debate that they have just watched? Maybe start with you, Daniel.
Mute, yeah. No, so I mean, since I selected the guests, maybe I should say something about this. I think Tobias and Simon are key practitioners and also thinkers at this right moment, a moment where I feel that a lot of things are actually changing. And, the pandemic, I guess, speeded up this process, or at least our awareness of certain processes. And I think it's just interesting to think how art and the very notion of what art can be is changing. And I think Simon really is exploring some of the most extreme things that are going on right now. And, if it's not just the way to distribute art or to be with art, but actually what an art piece can be, the ontology of art, I think that's very very interesting what Simon is doing in his exhibitions. And then I would say that Tobias, in a way, asks even bigger questions, namely who are we? I mean, really, it's about the very notion of what it is to be a being, a thinking and feeling being, a kind of the notion of subjectivity itself. And I think these. If you lock in, as we said in the conversation, I think if we lock in the entire, everyone in their apartments for a year and a half, and if we introduce entirely new technologies, visual technologies, and new currencies, you don't have to be Michel Foucault to understand that things will change. So I think that's what I was hoping that this conversation would be about, and I think at least we hinted at some things.
Great, thank you, Simon.
Yeah, well, I also just first of all want to, while we're all here, say thank you very much, because it started, I think it's initiated a conversation for me that otherwise wouldn't have been initiated quite in the same way. So I thank both the summit and Daniel and everybody involved for bringing Tobias and I into conversation, because it's already changing some of the ways that I think. So that's one thing I'd like to take away, is the effectiveness of these types of events, even if we're in different places. So thank you very much. But I think, for me, I think it's also, I think our conversation uniquely is looking for opportunities to find new ways to hint towards the world as it emerges. And I think that that if there's something to take away from this conversation, I think all of the actors here are trying to take what is happening, what is coming towards us, and move around that material towards something that is useful and positive. And I think that's a very valuable thing to take away. There's always scary things, there's always complicated things, but I think you can deal with them in lots of different ways.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'm afraid we ran out of time, so maybe the smartest thing of me to do is to thank Simon and Denny for saying such wonderful things, and I completely agree.
Super. Well, thank you all three of you so much for this time. And I think the most important message is clearly that they should all keep following what you do, because it's changing in the making. So thank you so much, and hope to see you again in person also. And have a nice rest of your day.
You too. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.